In this lesson, we'll take a look at one more piece of evidence that Harvey will gather to build his case that the blood in our body is circulating. In contrast to Galen's views, who thought that there were two kinds of blood, in the veins and in the arteries, Harvey's arguing that there's one kind of blood because the arteries and veins are connected. And so we actually have a system that's a dual circuit system where the heart is pumping blood through the lungs and back to the heart, and then the heart is pumping blood to the body and then makes its way back to the heart. This final piece of evidence is indirect evidence that the veins and arteries were connected. And this time he's going to use a quantitative approach. He's going to measure quantities. And he wants to calculate the volume of blood that flows through the heart in a given amount of time. So this again would be investigations of animals. He used dogs and other animals. So let's imagine it's a dog's heart. And so when you remove the heart, you can then figure out how much blood can you put into the left ventricle. Let's say Harvey estimated about 3 ounces of blood can fit in the left ventricle. And he conservatively estimated that 1/4 of that volume would be expelled per heartbeat. So 3 ounces times 1/4 ounce per beat, and that is 3/4 of an ounce of blood expelled per heartbeat. Let's continue with the math. 3/4 ounces of blood expelled per heartbeat, 33 beats per minute. You do the cancellation of the units there, you get 25 ounces of blood expelled per minute. 25 ounces of blood expelled per minute times 60 minutes in an hour, 1,500 ounces of blood per hour. That amounts to 93.75 pounds of blood are pumped per hour. Now Harvey says, wait a second. He knew from earlier experiments that there's only 5 pounds of blood in the entire animal. If you drain all the blood, you can measure how much blood an animal has. And in this particular species, 5 pounds. So for the heart to pump 93 pounds of blood per hour in an animal with only 5 pounds of blood, it must be the same 5 pounds of blood that is circulated many times through the heart. And so this quantitative analysis does strongly support the idea that blood must be circulating. So we'll add that as our final pillar in this mountain of evidence that Harvey has gathered for the two-circuit system. It's just one kind of blood, and it's the same blood that's circulating throughout this system. And that brings us to sort of the modern view of our circulatory system. In an average person, there are about 5 liters of blood, and the cardiac output is about 5 liters per minute. So blood on average takes about 1 minute to circulate through the system. And let's also note that the blood in the arteries is under higher pressure than the blood in the veins. Of course, the arteries are carrying blood away from the heart, then the blood is being pumped by that powerful left ventricle. And when the arteries branch into capillaries, the pressure of the blood decreases. So the blood pressure in the veins is low, and this is in part why valves are necessary to help the blood make its way back to the heart. So as we move around and we contract our muscles, that will help squeeze the blood in the low pressure vein system to get that blood back to the heart. We don't need valves in the arteries because the blood is under high pressure being pumped from that powerful left ventricle. Now, a few years after Harvey died, scientists using microscopes did eventually observe the physical connections between arteries and veins, and those blood vessels are called capillaries. The picture down here, we see how small capillaries are. The red discs, those are individual red blood cells. So capillaries are so small that the red blood cells have to move in a single file fashion. Over here on the left, we see arteries branch into smaller and smaller blood vessels, and then the smallest ones we call capillaries. And then those capillaries join to larger and larger veins. Of course, the veins, recall, have the valves that will keep the blood moving back to the heart. Capillaries make up about 80% of the total length of the circulatory system. So this is where the action is. Every single cell in our body is somewhere near a capillary, because it's the capillaries that are carrying the blood that has nutrients and the oxygen critical for cells to stay alive. In addition, waste materials produced by cells will be picked up by the blood for export. Capillaries are composed of cells that create hollow chambers through which blood flows. So here, this picture, this would be like a cross section through a capillary. So imagine taking a knife and cutting right through the capillary and then looking at it edge on. This is what we would see, that capillaries are made up of cells that have this shape that creates a hollow space. So here's one capillary cell. Now imagine another one right in front of it and behind it, and you can then start to see how a tube can be constructed. A whole bunch of capillary cells stuck together, but each has this shape that allows for this hollow space to be created, and that's the space through which red blood cells flow. So our plumbing is alive. So underneath your kitchen sink, you got pipes and things made of all kinds of different stuff, but that stuff is not alive, whether it's metal or PVC or whatever. Our plumbing is alive. Our blood vessels are made from living cells, like all the rest of our organs. Here we see a scanning electron microscope picture of a blood vessel with red blood cells in it and surrounding tissue. And so in 1628, Harvey published his findings and his assertion, his claim, his argument that the blood in our bodies is circulating. Interestingly, lots of physicians and scientists did not accept Harvey's conclusions. They were not yet ready to abandon Galen. It didn't take too long, however, before everybody came around to the understanding that we have today, that our blood does indeed circulate throughout our body. In the next lesson, we'll ask the question, well, why does the heart pump blood through the lungs? And this will get us to our final answer for why we breathe.